So what we're going to make next is we're going to make the caramel date hummus. Okay, there could be a little controversy, dessert hummus. Some people have feelings about dessert hummus, and I can support you in that. That's okay. You can have your feelings just fine. But basically, I did a whole book called The Great Vegan Bean Book. And so using beans instead of oil to give it the bulk that some other things do. So I've also made a caramel for like butterbeer. So I use full fat coconut milk and refined sugar, and it's delicious. However, this is a date caramel you can have if you don't want to have any fat or can't have any fat, can't have any refined sugar, or don't want to have any refined sugar and can have dates, right? So, and dates actually kind of mimic this wonderful caramel flavor. So I've given you two different versions. This one, we're going to use a can of beans, and a can used to be 15.5 ounces. It's like 15 ounces. Sometimes it's 14.5 ounces. A can. Again, don't stress over the little things. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put this can of beans of chickpeas, except for the ones that are trying to escape. Now, I could use this aquafaba in here if I need to thin things a little bit too. The other thing is I have 3/4 a cup of dates. Now, this also, the water from the dates is going to be kind of sweet, so that's something else that we could use to thicken things up. Let me get another measuring cup. I love my little spinny cabinet. Okay, that's going to get on somebody's nerves. There we go. Not mine, because I won't see it. All right. So aquafaba, if you're not going to use it this week, go ahead and fill it in ice cube trays. Generally, a regular cube is about 2 tablespoons, which is about 1 egg in cookies and things like that. So this didn't soak overnight, so it's not going to be super sweet. Let's see if but also, if you're making puree, then I could just puree them both together, and that's date puree, and we could use that. There's all different ways to use up some of these little leftover bits and pieces. And I'm starting to wonder if I need the bigger blender. Let's see what happens. It's going to be close. It's going to be close for sure. Okay. So we've got a can of chickpeas, 3/4 cups of dates. And you're like, that is not 3/4 cup, lady. They've soaked up, so they're bigger right now than they were before. We're going to put a teaspoon of vanilla extract. I believe this is, yes, this is the vanilla extract from before. And it's the vanilla, to me, that really makes it taste a little more like caramel. And we could add in some of this date water. We could add in some non-dairy milk. We could add in some aquafaba. Good. It's slightly sweet, so I'm going to use, let's see, what do we got? Use just a little bit. And we'll see if that blends. It may not. We may need more water. I did get some smaller containers to go into the Vitamix, but I haven't done an unboxing of that yet. You guys can kind of see that. Let's see what happens. We need a little bit more. See how thick that is? Okay. And if you guys really want to see how thick it is, like it is the thickest of the all the thickness. Okay, so let's put a little more water in there. And that little song was dishwasher finishing. My kitchen sings all the time to me. Isn't that nice? Isn't that sweet of it? Okay, so I'm just going to scrape this down a little bit. There's also some real thick paste under here. I'm going to go ahead and scrape some of that out in hopes that just kind of evens itself out a little bit. One of the things you could do is you could put chocolate in here too. You could put melted chocolate chips, or you could put cocoa powder to keep it oil free. And here's the tip. So if I wasn't using dates, there's a lot of dates in here. There's a reason. You don't want to taste the beans in the end. So but adding cocoa powder then is going to give it this like chocolatey flavor. So if I gave you a brownie dip and didn't tell you there were beans in it, you would not know. That is what I have to say. And this is in the Vitamix, we probably could do but let's get a little bit more. This is how it always is when you're not using your most powerful blender. And sometimes you may have to compromise a little bit on, I'm also going to try and get some of those beans from the very top for the thickness. If you've got a Vitamix, a Blendtec, something like that, it's going to work a lot better. But that doesn't mean you have to buy a $400 blender to have caramel dip for your apples at all. We do want it to be as thick as caramel as we possibly can within reason. And within reason means don't make yourself too crazy. If this water isn't enough, I'm probably going to just put in another quarter cup and then just let it be thin, because we're dipping stuff into it anyhow. I wish it had a little hole I could just put things in there. I think that's going to do it. Oh, well, I thought that was going to do it. Nope. So close, but yet so far. And it's just a process. And probably if I'd soaked the dates longer, I wouldn't have needed quite so much. I wouldn't have needed quite so much if I was in a more powerful blender. I'm going to stop that for a second. I think what's happening is when it stops, it's actually making it worse. So let me try not using that setting. Still got a little bit of stuff at the top. That one piece of date. So I'm just going to kind of shake it around some. See if we can get that. It can be fine if it's not perfect, but I'm just going to try a little bit more. Okay, and I think this is going to be about right. Let you see from overhead. See how creamy that looks? It looks a lot like caramel. See? And it tastes a lot like caramel. Does it have any bean flavor whatsoever? I think it has just a hint. There are two ways you could get rid of that. One is adding a little more vanilla. Two, adding the cocoa that we talked about. I think even adding a little bit of salt could be a pleasant thing to do. But we'll get that in there. It's amazing how much it looks like caramel though. And remember too, you're not just trying to make caramels out of it. You're going to dip something in there, a cookie or a brownie. We could use this as frosting on like an apple cake. If you wanted to, you could use cashews instead of beans, Rob. I'm not good with the swirly. Let's get some more on here and see if I can get a swirl going a little bit. There we go. So I'll let you guys see. And see, I think that's a pretty convincing caramel. And I'm putting it in my scary spider bowl. Okay. We'll move that over here for a second. Now I'm going to probably need this blender again. So let me see if I can clean this off a little bit and see if there's any questions. Good. And I think sometimes if you do white beans instead of chickpeas, it can be a little bit milder flavor. But it's still pretty, I really like it. So personally, it's a winner for me. And again, if it tastes a little too beany to you, you could go back in and put like, maybe like 1 or 2 tablespoons, depending on how dark you want the chocolate, and make it a caramel cocoa. And that'll give it a little more complexity of flavor. So you won't be, a little more vanilla would go a long way too.